Now I want to preface this by saying I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. Let me repeat that. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I am simply a reasonable individual, at least I like to think I am a reasonable individual, interpreting the contractual agreement. Now, if you just want to skip the nuances and all the jargon and legalese, I've made a highlight section down here of some of the key shittiness. Number one, you don't own the game, of course. It's 2025, we can't own shit. Class action waiver and arbitration, that's always fun. You're forced to update the game, that's cool. They can just revoke the game at any time for no reason at all. Very cool. You aren't allowed to modify the game, and you aren't allowed to decompile the game or otherwise extract its assets. You're not allowed to use content which they deem offensive. There's no liability for any form of support. They could just drop the project right now, and there'd be nothing you can do. Nothing you could say, hey, could you make the game work again? They don't have to do that. They can change the terms at any moment, and any rights are reserved by the company. That's not stated explicitly in the EULA. Now, I am working off a copy that I got last night. You can see right here, that's when I got it. But if you want to check it for yourself, it's right here on the damn Steam page. Just click right here, and you can read it in full. It may change when this comes out, and if it does, then it doesn't apply, but I'm going to assume it hasn't changed much, if at all. Now I'm just going to summarize this and explain why a lot of these things are bad and or questionable. Because, I could read through this whole fucking block, but, who's got time for that? So anyway, the first section is this long-winded preamble, but basically, you agree to the EULA by downloading or playing the game, which, fairly typical. Next is the disputes provision, which states a class action waiver and arbitration clause in accordance to the ZeniMax terms of service, which is not listed in the EULA itself. And I'm not going to take the time to further read up on other agreements, because I have better things to do. But anyway, additionally, all uses of the game are dictated by this EULA and the ZeniMax terms of service. Anything not explicitly stated here in context of rights is assumed to fall towards ZeniMax, so if they don't list something, you don't have the right to do it. ZeniMax can process your personal information in accordance to the privacy policy, not listed here, of course. Additionally, you agree to the ZeniMax Code of Conduct, not listed here. And ZeniMax owns all copies of the game. You do not buy it, you get a license. Now, the first section is limited license restrictions and ownership. This puts restrictions on what you can do with it. So only by agreeing are you allowed to play the game, and you can only play the game, nothing else with it. You can't redistribute it or use it for commercial purposes. Any virtual currencies in the game carry the same license as everything else. ZeniMax is not required to update or support the game at all over any time period, meaning, a couple years from now they don't have to support it, but even tomorrow they don't have to support it. ZeniMax is allowed to change what you're able to access in the game at any time without notice. Termination of this agreement requires deletion of your copy of the game and all rights to it. And the ZeniMax terms of service have conditions that apply to user-generated content, which is additionally not listed in the EULA. I'm not sure what it says because I haven't read it, but I'm going to assume it's nothing too good. Number 2 is about software. Yay. ZeniMax is allowed to force you to update your game, and you are not allowed to play the game until you update it. Additionally, ZeniMax has anti-cheat tools which will scan your device. That's section number 2. Section 3 is limitations on the game. Some features are only available online, and violating any of these limitations will terminate the agreement. And now you agree that you will not help or not do yourself. Ooh, this is a long list. Redistribute or resell the game. Typical, fairly typical. Attempt to reverse engineer, disassemble, decompile, or modify the game. You can only create a copy for archiving. Now this right here is quite bad because it essentially kills any deep modding, because in order to mod a game, you kinda need to reverse engineer or disassemble, decompile it. You gotta see how it works to change it. You also can't circumvent security measures, for example, anti-cheat or DRM. Typical. You can't use cheats in the software which modifies the game or impacts other users. Now the wording here is very tricky in that it doesn't have to impact other users to actually violate the EULA. Now the main issue here is that this is a single player game, and a player should be able to cheat in a single player game because it's a single player game. Come on now. You aren't allowed to use exploits for commercial purposes. I'm not really sure what this means. It's a single player game. I can tell, based on the way the EULA is worded, that this was intended for a more MMO style game. Its wording suggests that. So this doesn't really apply to here, Oblivion. But, for example, if you discover a glitch, like let's say Bethesda adds the fucking Creation Club to Oblivion, the remaster, you aren't allowed to sell the exploit to other people. Additionally, you aren't allowed to extract any part while the game's running. ZeniMax is allowed to explicitly state that they're allowing certain third-party softwares, but again, they have to explicitly allow it. Also, you cannot modify game files in any way that is not explicitly allowed by ZeniMax. So this covers basically anything. I mean, any game file. You know, if you want to add in a texture revamp or change up the game shaders, that's modifying the game files, and if ZeniMax doesn't allow it, you can't. Additionally, you can't tamper with the communication services of the game. If the game connects to the internet, to the Bethesda servers, you can't interfere with that to like spoof packets or anything. Additionally, you cannot emulate official services. So, for example, in the future, if the servers go down, you can't emulate it to restore any functionality. That's why that's particularly bad. Section I. Section J, spread illegal content, which doesn't really make sense in a single player game. It makes sense if there was shareable user-generated content and this was a multiplayer game, but for a single player game it doesn't really make sense to be in here, because how do you do that? K, spread content with the copyrighted material of other parties. This is quite bad for modding, because I think we've all seen the goofy mods, like the one in Skyrim that turns the dragons into Macho Man Randy Savage, or Thomas the Tank Engine, or Mud Crabs become Mr. Krabs, and that would be forbidden in here. Section L is you can't be a pedo, which I guess is understandable, but it feels kinda redundant with Section J. And also it's a single player game, so how the fuck does that even work? You can't harass other users. It's a single player game, again, how? You can't spread real world information, so like doxing, but again, single player game, doesn't make sense. Are you gonna are you gonna like put a bunch of tomatoes on the floor and spell out someone's address? I don't know. You can't impersonate people or misrepresent your identity. Very vague. It applies to anyone. So if you say, "Hi guys, I'm Todd Howard from Microsoft," I guess that's bannable. But again, single player fucking game. And then Section P is where it gets really dicey. Spread anything hateful, sexual, vulgar, threatening, defamatory, or offensive. That sounds vague, and that's because it is. The wording is incredibly vague. And of course, determined solely by ZeniMax, so they can just say, "Hey, we find this offensive, get the fuck out." It doesn't matter what it actually is, or if any reasonable person would find it offensive. Additionally, you cannot crack, exploit, cheat, or counterfeit anything in the game, and you are required to submit exploits and bugs to ZeniMax, which, God, with all the bugs in Bethesda games, you'd think they'd take that one out, but I guess not. Also, you can't spread malware, or any programs you're not allowed to, or additionally, or anything which could disrupt the game. Very vague, and additionally, mods could easily fall under this. For example, mods that just add a bunch of random bullshit to the game that could be interpreted as disruption. And then additionally, any attempts to do the above violates the agreement, and you're liable for any damages and can be prosecuted for violation of any of these terms. And also, the license you receive applies to the game in whole, not sections of it. So that means that the license applies to the executable and the game data, and it doesn't only apply to certain pieces. That's what that stipulates. Section 4 is about ownership of the game, which states that you don't own the game. I mean, it's pretty simple. Well, rather, it says you don't own the game content. For example, models or textures. So that's a nice little stipulation right there, too. Section 5 is about personal information. Hooray! You agree to the ZeniMax Media Privacy and Policy Cookie Policy. Those aren't listed here, of course. And additionally, ZeniMax can disclose any information they have on you to better comply with the terms in here for laws. For example, if they get subpoenaed, they're going to share the information, but that's basically a given. And additionally, to suit ZeniMax's interests, which is very vague, and I suspect this is how they could theoretically monetize data. I'm not saying that they are, but they feasibly could using the text listed in Section 5, assuming that the privacy policy permits it, which I don't know if it does because I didn't read it, because, again, I have better things to do. Additionally, there's monitoring updates, Section 6. ZeniMax, you allow them to apply updates to your game. Again, it's a mandatory update, and you're allowing them to remotely administer updates as well. Additionally, all data that passes through ZeniMax servers may be monitored. You agree to this. And additionally, the Terms of Service and Privacy Policy add further conditions to this, which naturally aren't actually listed in the EULA, because, of course. And then there is termination, Section 7. The EULA starts when you agree to it and remains in effect until terminated. You know, typical contract wording there. It applies when you agree to it and stops when terminated, except the sections that apply after termination, like, for example, Section 4 here. Additionally, when you may terminate the EULA at any moment by removing all copies of the game you have. Additionally, ZeniMax may terminate this agreement for any or no reason. They can just terminate the EULA between you and them for no goddamn reason. They don't need a reason. And that again means that they can arbitrarily and without... Actually, they will give notice if they terminate it for no reason. That's in the long-winded legalese wording, but they can just say that you lose access to the game, and it doesn't matter if you actually violated the EULA, which is pretty shitty. Additionally, when ZeniMax terminates the agreement, you lose access to the game. That's in Section 7. Section 8 is about export restrictions. It's a pretty short section, but it's nothing too long. It's basically just, you're not allowed to move the game to a place that the US doesn't allow exports to. Which I suppose is a bit more of a concern in modern times, but it's still a strange thing to put in the EULA. But I guess I understand this one. It's to cover their ass. Next is Section 9, warranty. The physical media is subject to different terms than the online copies, so keep that in mind. But ZeniMax cannot be held accountable for anything that may lose availability if you don't have internet, or if the servers go down, or anything like that. For example, if they shut down the servers, they're no longer liable to supply any of that content, or ensure that that content works. Section 10, limitation of liability and reimbursement. ZeniMax is not liable for any damages, even if they were previously aware that such damages could occur. And this may not apply depending on where you live. Now, what this means is basically, if their program, or I guess, if Oblivion fucks up your computer and deletes your operating system or some shit, they're not liable for that. Even if someone explicitly programmed that and said, hey, this is gonna fuck up someone's computer, they're still not held liable. Additionally, you will reimburse ZeniMax for any losses caused by the breach of the EULA, or any actions that you yourself take. So, for example, if you breach the EULA and they sue you, you're liable to pay the lawyer's fees, and this applies after the EULA is terminated. And now for number 11, ZeniMax may revise the EULA, and when that happens, this agreement is terminated, and you may agree to the new terms. So basically what this means is, if they ever update the EULA, you are forced to agree to it. Otherwise, you lose access to the game. Now, I gotta commend them here, because at least you get the choice of who you get fucked by. You can either go fuck yourself, or you can let them fuck you. I gotta say, very innovative. Now, there's Section 12, which constitutes weird federal US regulations with how the government is allowed to use software. It's not anything that I believe is going to affect an everyday consumer, and if it does affect you, then you'd probably know the laws better than I. So we're just going to skip over Section 12. Section 13 is governing law, which dictates what laws apply. It falls under Maryland laws if you're in North America, or if you're not in North America, it falls under England laws, except in cases where regulations of another state or country would interfere with the laws. And this applies after termination. So, if you sue them, and let's say you're in Canada, Mexico, or the United States, it goes to a Maryland court. But if you're in any other country, I guess, it goes to England court. So that's something to keep note of. And then there's Section 14 miscellaneous, which is just additional terms. Number 1 is that the EULA overrides any prior agreements between you and ZeniMax. So basically, if you agreed to some beforehand, the EULA can override the agreement. Additionally, the terms of service, or the ZeniMax terms of service, apply to the product as well, which, again, not listed here. And additionally, any conflicts will prioritize the EULA, taking priority unless stated otherwise. And if there's any terms that cannot be enforced in the law of where you live, the terms can be reinterpreted to reflect the intention of the EULA as long as it stays within the law. So that's another cover your ass clause right there. And additionally, ZeniMax not enforcing any number of terms is not a waiver of their rights. In the end, all waivers of their rights will require they give a written signature. For example, why this is bad is, let's say they permit modding. They're not actively going after it. This stipulates that just because they don't go after, let's say, some modders doesn't mean they can't go after others. Because again, they still have the right to disallow it under the Section 3 with that huge fucking laundry list. My voice is fading. Additionally, these terms only apply between you and ZeniMax, so there's no other parties except, children companies of ZeniMax like Bethesda is, I believe. And additionally, this applies after termination. Now, the key takeaways here is that, well, first of all, it's a pretty god-awful EULA. This is probably one of the worst I've seen. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not in the habit of reading EULAs, so perhaps I could be wrong, but alas, here we are. Now, I'd say overall, if you care about your rights, maybe just... I would say don't buy the game, but you're not really buying it. You're licensing it, so... If you care deeply about consumer rights, don't license the game, I should say. And again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is my interpretation. I am not a lawyer. If you are confused about the terms, talk to a legal representative and not some idiot on the internet. But again, overall, it's a very weird EULA. It has a very strong smell of this wasn't written for this specific game. Because, I mean, there's all kinds of things in here about other players, but again, Oblivion is a single-player game. I'm sure someone will make a mod that makes it multiplayer, but hey, modding's not allowed in the EULA, so... so yeah, overall I'd say this is a very bad EULA, especially considering it's Bethesda, the company who relies on modding. I think it's very strange for them to have a EULA which stipulates that you're not allowed to mod or even engage in activities which would help the modding scene. For example, disassembly or reverse engineering. And of course, this is my interpretation. If you want to read the EULA is available. It's very long-winded, but you can read it regardless. And that's all. I don't know what to say. This is awful.